I want to talk to you about the characteristics of addicts. It doesn't matter what the addiction is, if it's gambling, sex, substance abuses like alcohol, illegal drugs, legal drugs, shopping, whatever it is, addicts have certain characteristics. The first one is that addicts are blaming. They refuse to take personal responsibility for the consequences of their addiction and their addiction. It's always somebody else's fault. The addict will sometimes even purposefully set up an argument to where there can be a fight, or you'll say something and the addict will say, "Now what can I do? I've got to leave. I can't stay here with you. It's your fault that I've got to go out and go drinking or go back out and gamble," is what they're basically saying to you. Addicts are self-centered. No matter what, addicts put their addiction first. They're going to put their addiction over family, their addiction over being responsible, their addiction over your feelings, their addiction over your needs, their addiction over the good of the relationships. All of their relationships. Addicts are emotionally immature. It is said that when someone starts with an addiction, that they emotionally stop maturing and they kind of stay right at that age where they started, and then only pick up that emotional maturing process when the addiction is halted or stopped. So addicts are emotionally immature. They're emotionally hypersensitive, which means they're going to be reactive. They're going to feel strongly with anything that happens and strongly react, and they really react to rejection. They can't handle rejection. It's overwhelming to them. And as a result, when they feel rejected, it elicits intense emotional reaction. So they're often jealous, possessive, and insecure. Addicts have what's called a dry drunk. A dry drunk is basically the addict acting the same way during times when the addict is not using the substance. So it could be a short-term sobriety, maybe it's trying to go without that particular substance or activity, or it's a time period where the addict is, for whatever reason, they have dry drunks. And that dry drunk is the exact, doesn't have to be alcohol, but that dry drunk or that dry time without their addiction, they act the same way. The thinking processes are identical and maybe even darker and more somber and more introspective and moody than the addict even is when the substance is used, because the substance, at least for the first part of an addiction, takes away pain and makes the addict feel better. Addicts have a great degree of emotional pain. It's very common to go back in their lives and see childhood abuse, to see neglect, to see deep emotional wounds. And these are unresolved issues, which often are one of the reasons that the addict uses the substance or activity, which is to numb that pain and to not have to deal with that pain. Addicts have a low frustration tolerance. What does that mean? That means that it's not going to take much to get them upset, to get them mad, to get them complaining, to get them to give up and say, forget it. It's that low frustration tolerance. Maybe you can even see that in a small child, and yet looking at it in an adult, you're like, why is this here? Addicts are in denial. Denial means that you don't admit the truth because you don't want to deal with it. It's too painful. So for now, the addict is going to say, I don't have a problem. I don't have a drinking problem. I don't have a gambling problem. I don't have a problem with sexual addiction. I can put this down anytime I want to. And they can say that and mean it. And they can sometimes go without it, as I said, for a while, especially in the beginning. But the denial is about the addiction. The denial is about the effect of the addiction in the addict's life and in the addict's relationships. Rationalization. All addicts rationalize. This is an unconscious thought process that allows the addict to kind of rationalize why it's okay to continue using the substance or activity. They have a saying in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a 12-step program for alcoholics to help them get sober, that alcoholics have what they call stinkin' thinkin'. Stinking thinking is the addict brain, the addict process, the addict emotions. It has to do with unbelief and unreasonable beliefs that they have about themselves, others' life, and their addiction. It's negative thinking, it's negative emotions, it is distorted thinking about the addiction, distorted thinking about themselves, and distorted thinking about life. It's thinking and reasoning that doesn't work. Addicts lie and they manipulate. Some even lie about things that they don't have to lie about, but addicts have to lie to continue using and doing what they're doing because they've got to cover it up, because if you knew everything about it, they're afraid that there would be some type of consequence or boundary for them. So addicts continue to lie. Some of them lie to get their substance. They lie to get money. They lie to get financial support. They lie to get emotional support. They lie to keep you hooked into the relationship. And this lying becomes a lifestyle. Addicts often have difficulty with social interactions, so they have a lot of social anxiety and difficulty. Some of them will say that the only way they were ever comfortable in a group of people was when they were drinking or when they were using some drugs. Addicts have low self-worth, really low self-worth, but even though they act arrogant, they act like they have great self-worth and that they feel great about themselves and great about everything they're doing, and you're the one that has the problem. But in reality, inside, Toby Rice Drews calls them paper tigers. That arrogance is a facade. They're not feeling that way inside about themselves. Really, they feel bad. They feel bad. They feel not good about themselves, but they cover up that pain by engaging in the addiction. But this is one of the reasons why, if you want to help an addict, beating them up and telling them how bad they are isn't going to encourage them and want them to get sober, because they already feel bad about themselves. It only makes them have more self-pity and more self-reproach, which keeps them stuck. Addicts are grandiose. They have grandiosity. And this is this feeling about them. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous calls them big king babies, expecting themselves to be waited on like kings, yet acting like babies. So they have this grandiose thinking that they are cheated out of what is rightfully theirs in life and that they deserve more. They have unrealistic expectations. This increases their resentment, and they have an exaggerated sense of their own importance, their own abilities, knowledge, accomplishments, or significance. Addicts feel that they're omnipotent, which means that they are unable to admit that they have any loss of control over the substance or activity. They're going to believe and mean it that they can stop anytime they want to. They just don't want to stop right now. It's not the time. Maybe later. It's not a big enough problem. But they can. They can stop when they need to stop. Addicts feel sorry for themselves. They're full of self-pity. And this self-pity can get them into these deep, dark moods, which are those stinking thinking places, and those dry drunks, well, that gets them into using again, because they've got to get themselves out of that feeling of self-pity. Addicts are resentful. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous takes one whole step, or two steps, the fourth step and the fifth step, where addicts write out their resentments, and they've got to tell the resentments to God, and they've got to take responsibility for their part in those things that they have resentments over. These resentments lead them again to go back to using, because they have all that emotional pain, or they feel sorry for themselves and they think that they don't have to do anything different. Addicts are often perfectionists with others, difficult to please. It's often said that you can't fry an egg the right side up for an alcoholic, because they'll always tell you that the egg is the wrong side up. Well, of course, the egg is the same on this side as it is on this side. It's just putting it in the pan. So there's no way to please a perfectionistic addict. Guilt and shame, full of it. You may not see it. You may not see that shame. Like I said, you may see nothing but the arrogance. But deep down inside, there is guilt. In fact, that shame, the shame of this cycle of addiction, acting out, feeling that guilt and that shame, taking that pain and those feelings and acting out again to cover that up, happens over and over and over again. So more of the addiction is used to cover up more of the guilt and shame. So every time the addict gets into that addiction and uses it, the guilt and shame piles up, and then they got to take more of the substance or activity to cover up that guilt and that shame. Addicts have ambivalence toward authority. They're kind of arrogant and pompous with that nobody's going to tell me what to do attitude. And so they aren't going to be afraid of power and authority. They may tell you that they don't need you or anyone else in their life, that they don't need you or anyone else to care about them, that they're fine, they can make it on their own. And in reality, they know they can't, but they're going to act like they can. Addicts feel grossly inadequate in their lives. Inadequacy has to do with low self-worth, low self-esteem, but they feel inadequate to rise to the occasion, to do what they need to do, sober and clean. So addicts instead will use the addiction to cover up that inadequacy, which all of this just puts together. So all of this increases the likelihood that the addict is going to find reasons to continue in the addiction until the addict is ready to get help. And I can do another video later that will talk to you about how you can change yourself to increase the likelihood that the addict will want to get sober and clean and change. So I hope that this description of the characteristics of addicts has been helpful for you. So thank you for watching this video on Change My Relationship.